Welcome to the fourth module, where we're going to talk all about safety. As a 4-H volunteer, one of your highest priorities is keeping yourself and 4-H members you work with safe. The Wyoming 4-H program works hard to make sure that our 4-H members are part of a safe learning environment. We do this by making sure all of our volunteers are safe and ready to take on the challenges that come with being a 4-H volunteer. As a 4-H volunteer, you sign a code of conduct when you enroll in 4-H Online. You're also required to complete a background check before working with youth. If you plan to drive, you need to complete a motor vehicle records check, and you must also attend a training, like this orientation. When you enroll in 4-H Online, our enrollment system, you are asked to check some boxes as part of the process. Many of us do not realize that those boxes include our volunteer code of conduct. You're agreeing that you will adhere to a code of conduct, which is one way that we make sure our members and our volunteers are part of a safe learning experience. The code of conduct includes being a positive role model and representative of the 4-H program, being respectful of others, and other what seem like common sense type of statements. There's also a special bullet point about electronic communication, including social media and texting. In order to protect yourself and the youth, we would ask that you please make sure that your electronic contact is not one-on-one. Be sure to include parents or other youth in text messages or social media posts. In order to make sure you understand what you have agreed to as a volunteer, you can find a copy of the Volunteer Code of Conduct online. The 4-H program is part of the University of Wyoming, and as University of Wyoming volunteers, we are required to follow the university's Working with Minor policies. To stay safe, it's important that you remember some key points. The 4-H program has a 1-to-10 ratio of adults to youth. If you look at the next bullet point, we really have a 2-to-20 ratio. There should always be at least 2 certified volunteers present at all meetings and events. If you're worried about this concern and are concerned, please talk with your 4-H educator in order to discuss possible solutions. As a leader, you should avoid one-on-one contact with members. This means if a member has to stay after because a parent's not there to get them, it would be good to ask another leader or member to stay with you until everyone is gone. Be sure to work in open spaces. Always encourage parents to attend your meetings. And please avoid transportation of just one youth. Be aware that children have personal boundaries and respect them. If you need to have physical contact in order to demonstrate a skill, please ask permission of the child, and of course do not touch anywhere a bathing suit would cover. Never hit or strike a child, even when you're playing around, and always use positive reinforcement in an understanding tone. Additional safety measures need to be taken when you're chaperoning overnight events. The first is that you'll need to take an additional online chaperone training. When you're staying with youth, no adults can share sleeping quarters with the youth. The rule is that you either have to have 2 adults sharing sleeping quarters with the youth, or that the adults must sleep in a different room or a different building if there's just one adult. Of course, when you share sleeping quarters, you need to make sure that the adults are the same sex as the youth they're staying with. Some facilities have group shower settings. If this type of shower or changing setting cannot be avoided, accommodations will need to be made for youth and adult chaperones to use the facilities at different times. Also, when you're doing room checks or looking in on youth, the best practice is to make sure that you have another adult volunteer with you. The next section is all about protecting our youth. A brochure on child abuse and neglect is included on our website. Take some time to read these statistics. What they tell us is that child abuse is happening everywhere, in all 23 counties in Wyoming and the Wind River Reservation. In 2016, there were 970 unique substantiated victims of child abuse and child maltreatment. That means 970 youth under 18 experiencing some type of child maltreatment. When you look at that, approximately 68% of them were neglect, which is followed by physical abuse and then sexual abuse. Wyoming is one of only 3 states that says all citizens have the duty to be reporters. Most states say only professionals have to report, like teachers, doctors, or law enforcement. Remember, it's critical that if you suspect something, you report. You do not need to have confirmation of abuse to report. If you suspect, you report. It's the role of the Child Welfare Agency to sort out the details. Everything we talk about is considered child abuse and neglect. The term child abuse and neglect covers physical abuse, physical injury, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and abandonment. For more information on what each one of these specifically means, there's a handout on the web. Let's look at some general signs of abuse. Some of these signs can be signs of other things. Look for extreme changes or combinations or something that really just doesn't feel right to you. We have aggression with the danger of risk-taking behavior, disobedience, withdrawal, anxiety, depression, extreme moodiness, low self-esteem, sudden changes in behavior, hypersensitivity to sudden or startling stimuli, fear of parents or other adults, suicidal thoughts, frequent absences from events or appointments, drug or alcohol abuse, frequent injuries, and fear of going home. Remember, once again, these could be signs of other things, but if you do see them, really consider the situation and report if you think it needs to happen. Let's look at physical abuse versus non-intentional injuries. Think about it. Was there intention or just a non-intentional injury that occurred? It can be difficult to determine, but you will likely have a gut reaction. Think back to when you were a kid. What kind of injuries did you have from playing on your own, playing with other kids, or playing sports? When I played softball, I always came home with rug burns, scratches on my knees and legs and arms from sliding, bruises from getting hit by the ball. Think about the fact that bony edges of the body, your knees, elbows, forearms, are most the common areas to get bruised during normal play. You see bruises that aren't from normal play. It may be in the shape of a hand, a belt buckle, or teeth marks. Also remember that soft tissue areas like your cheeks, your buttocks, or your thighs aren't normally those that bruise. When looking at sexual abuse, please remember that children frequently don't talk about it. Abusers are commonly using threats to keep their victims quiet, and some of them even bribe the kids and tell them that no one will believe them. In some cases, abusers may scare the child into believing they will both go to jail, that the child will be placed in foster care if they talk. The child may also feel embarrassed or ashamed. Sexual abuse can occur, and physical evidence may disappear quickly or not exist at all. Be sure to report this as soon as possible. When suspecting emotional abuse, try to match what you are seeing with the behavior of the child's primary giver or the person who might be demeaning them. Emotional abuse can be difficult to pin down, and it's markers for other situations or conditions. Think about, does the primary caregiver constantly insult and demean the child? Do they make unrealistic and convincing threats to abandon or harm them? Do they behave in an emotionally detached and distant manner? Do they reject the child or don't care how the child is doing? Do they encourage or prevent antisocial behavior from the child, or do they work to humiliate, single out, criticize, or punish the child in public? What to do if a child discloses to you? First of all, believe the child. Try to remain calm with your voice and facial expressions so that the child doesn't become fearful of reporting. Be sure not to interrupt the child so that they feel validated in their disclosure. Try to talk privately. Be sure to listen, truly listen to the child, and reassure them that they are doing the right thing. Also, be sure that you explain your responsibility to report. Don't give them false hope that you won't report. Also, don't investigate it. That's not your job. It's someone else's responsibility, and be sure to report immediately. So if you do have a disclosure or you suspect child abuse, what do? Typically, you'll want to call the local county office of your Department of Family Services to report child abuse as soon as possible. If that's not possible, feel free to call your local law enforcement. You'll want to be prepared to provide specific information. You can remain anonymous, but it's helpful to the termination process and possible investigation for your name and contact information. If you're uncertain about how to make a report, contact your 4-H educator and you can make the report together. It's important to have as much information as possible, so it's good if you're available for the reporting. You'll want to provide things like the name, age, sex, maybe race and address of the child if you have them. You'll want to provide specific information on any abuse, and possibly the name, address of the parents or caregivers. As we conclude this training, we have a few more points to cover about being a volunteer in the Wyoming 4-H program. By completing this training, your online enrollment, and your background check, you have options about how you want to be involved in Wyoming 4-H. You can choose to be an activity volunteer, helping out with club or county events during driving youth around or planning a fundraiser and other similar activities. You could be a club volunteer by running a 4-H meeting, working with youth officers and communicating activities and events to members, a project volunteer who leads a project in which you have an interest or you're willing to learn more about, a committee member helping to plan events and county programs and shape your local and state 4-H program, a coach where you work with a team of interested youth to compete in a county or state contest, or a chaperone staying overnight with youth during a trip or camp. A job description for each of these roles can be found online or by contacting your 4-H educator. Did you know that when identifying the 4th H, the original suggestion was hustle? I think health was probably a much better choice. Being a 4-H leader comes with responsibility. As a 4-H volunteer, you're not only changing the lives of young people you're working with, you're also granted permission to use the 4-H clover. The 4-H clover is one of the few emblems that are regulated by law and may only be used with guidelines set up by the United States Department of Agriculture. Because of this, the clover needs to be used correctly. Look at the 2 emblems before you. Do you have a guess of which clover is being used correctly? The answer is the clover on the right. The official 4-H emblem is a 4-leaf clover with an H in each leaf. The stem turned to the right. The emblem may be 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional. The emblem on the right also includes the 18 USC 707. This is the United States Congress number that protects the clover. The emblem can only be used for educational or informational uses, which the Cooperative Extension Service deems to be in the best interest of the 4-H program, which can be properly controlled by Extension Services. If you're making a flyer for a club activity or printing club t-shirts, using the emblem is an acceptable use. Selling your private animals and marketing them to use is an inappropriate use of the 4-H emblem. If you have questions about appropriate use, please contact your local county 4-H educator prior to the use of the emblem. A handout with more specifics on this is included on our website. Here's some more specifics for using the clover. Use the 4-H emblem with the 18 USC 707. Don't place text or images in front of the 4-H emblem. Never use the emblem to apply product endorsement. And when using the 4-H emblem or the 4-H name to raise funds, it must be done in accordance with local, state, and national policies. As a 4-H volunteer, you also may help with raising money. Here's some additional rules for when you are raising money for the 4-H program. All of your fundraisers must be approved by the 4-H educator, and the fundraising request should be filled out and turned into the extension office. All money raised in the name of 4-H can only be used for 4-H activities, programs, and resources in a manner consistent with the mission of our 4-H program. And all money raised in inventory purchases with 4-H funds must be accountable for the year. This is done through our yearly auditing process and our treasurer's reports. You are now ready to take on the world of 4-H. Here are a few keys to help you be successful. Communication is key. Find out how your communication happens in your club and county, and do your best to communicate with other members and volunteers about that communication. Use the positive youth development concepts you heard about today, essential elements, experiential learning, the thriving model, and life skills. Get started. Don't wait for someone to ask you. Ask them how you can help. Learn more when you can. Check out the Wyoming 4-H volunteer webpage, attend trainings, and do your best to find out more. And most importantly, ask questions. We never know what you need to know if you don't ask. Thank you for attending this training. As we end, I'd like to show you one more video that really brings home why we need you as a leader. Again, thank you for volunteering. Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Please remember to enroll in 4-H Online if you haven't done so already, and watch for your background check and get that completed.
You're going to need me. You're going to need us. All of us. You're going to need our technical skills, our math, our engineering skills. You're going to need our help with your water, your air, your food. You're going to need our organizational skills, our problem-solving skills. You're going to need our determination, our honesty, our compassion. You're going to need the next generation of leaders to face the challenges the future will bring. And we promise we'll be there. when you need us.
Thank you again for your support of the 4-H program. We're excited to have you as a future volunteer.